Hello, I'm Ash, and welcome to this tubecast, which I was kind of hoping I wouldn't have to do again, because it's about Dr. John Campbell. And I'd hoped that the last review that I did of his stuff was maybe just him misinterpreting something, but I think there's something more going on here. Let's dive into what he's got to say. This one's about ivermectin, which if you've had a look at any of Dr. John Campbell's site, you'll find further down he has a real thing for ivermectin. He seems to be quite excited about it. But let's dive in.
Well, welcome to today's talk. It's Sunday the 6th of March. Now, let me just show you a slide to start off with here. This is Santoshi Omura, and this is William Campbell. And of course, they co-won the Nobel Prize in 2015 for the discovery of ivermectin.
Fantastic. There's two people that won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of ivermectin, which was used as an antiparasitic in humans. That's superb. What does that have to do with COVID-19?
And I really think this is going to be one of the huge scandals of this pandemic. So people that call ivermectin horse paste, well, it won a Nobel Prize, for human medicine, of course, as it's revolutionised some aspects of parasitology in poorer countries.
Okay. I don't know where we're going with this because yes, ivermectin is a superb drug, and the inventors of it won a Nobel Prize, but not for use with COVID. That's not to say you can't repurpose a drug, but let's clarify. Horse paste, yes, there was an issue because not only was ivermectin used for treatment of humans, it's been used for treatment of animals. Because the FDA CDC had not recommended ivermectin for treatment in the use for COVID-19, there were some people who wandered off to their local farm store and bought an animal version of it based on what they had seen on the internet, and they took it, and a lot of people ended up overdosing because obviously you tend to use with medicines, it tends to be the number of milligrams or micrograms per kilo of body weight. Well, a horse or a cow weighs 4 to 6 times more than a large human would. So you've got people who have no idea what the drug does, taking a drug that's been formulated for an animal, and a large animal at that. So yes, the media did leap on that and probably ridiculed people for doing it. The time for us to look at ivermectin to say, yes, this is a good drug to use and to repurpose for COVID-19 is when you have the evidence, the clinical evidence to show that it has a beneficial effect. Have we got that evidence? No.
So I want to look at a couple of studies. This is the first study I want to look at. Well, actually, before we go to the first study, let's just look at this. This is remdesivir, which is one of the current antivirals, and we notice it costs £340 per vial. So not exactly cheap. Ivermectin here, this is the WHO list of essential medicines. And this is on the WHO list, and it costs literally cents per tablet. Now, I do know that there's been a fuss in the United States about the cost of ivermectin, but between you and me, I think the insurance companies are being ripped off a bit because it's dirt cheap to make. They make it by the kilo in India, and it's essentially free. It costs as much to wrap up in packages and blister packs as it does for the actual drug. So if you're actually paying the real price of it, it's very, very cheap. So there you go. That's the list for that's the UK reference there, the British National Formula, which is the definitive text. And there's the WHO list of essential medicines. So no need to take my word for it at all. Please don't.
I won't. Right. Okay. So you've identified these two medicines. What does the cost of the drug have to do with its efficacy within within the field to which you're going to use it. We're using it for COVID-19. What does the price have to do with whether or not it's efficacious? Whether or not this is a good drug to use for COVID-19? The price has nothing to do with it. Unless you're trying to suggest something different, I'd suggest you're making a weird argument, a really strange argument.
And then we'll look at this study now. Now here's this study here. Treatment with ivermectin is associated with decreased mortality in COVID-19 patients. Analysis of a national federated database. Now this is a conference paper presentation, and the authors are based in Miami, which I think is in Florida, isn't it? So interesting. We haven't got a lot of detail, but what we have, the detail we have got, limited, but it is really quite interesting reading. Always a bit frustrating with conference papers. You would like a lot more information. Very often they do publish more, but I can't find it for that one yet.
Okay, so the reason you can't find anything for that conference paper abstract is that nothing further has been published, and there are reasons for that. This is a conference paper abstract. This isn't a full-on peer-reviewed study. It's a study based retrospectively on data that's already been collected. So is it easy to design this study? You certainly, because it's a retrospective study, you're not actually designing it. You can only design it within the parameters of the data that's already been collected.
So anyway, that's the link for that. Don't take my word for it, check it out. Purpose of the study: to evaluate the difference in mortality. And this is in patients treated with ivermectin versus patients treated with remdesivir. So dirt cheap ivermectin, Nobel Prize winning drug. Remdesivir, expensive antiviral.
Again, why are we referencing the price of it? Why are we referencing that it's a Nobel Prize winning drug? It is, but for a different purpose. I don't know, maybe paracetamol won a Nobel Prize. Do we jump on that and say, here, try this for COVID? That'll probably fix it. There's no good reason to believe that because that drug won a Nobel Prize, or because the inventors of the drug won a Nobel Prize, that this is a wonder drug for any illness that comes along. Indeed, the manufacturers of ivermectin do not expect it to have, they can't see a mechanism for how it would help with people with COVID-19. They've published that. They don't see the mechanism. Why are we so set on this, Dr. Campbell? What's behind it?
Now, this was taken from 44 healthcare organisations and 68 million potential patients in the United States, and the data was collected from the 1st of January 2020 to July the 11th 2021. So that's about 18 months, isn't it? Quite a long time. Now, the materials and methods: retrospectively identified diagnosed adults, recorded use of ivermectin but not remdesivir. So these had ivermectin but not remdesivir, making the ivermectin group. And then they recorded the use of remdesivir but not ivermectin. So they were mutually exclusive groups. So in other words, we have an ivermectin group here and we have a remdesivir group here, and we can compare and contrast these two because they were mutually exclusive groups. So it makes perfect sense. You know, it's a well thought out study.
Well thought out study. Maybe something on that towards the end of this video. Couple of things. Ivermectin is a tablet form drug. Can be handed to a patient. They can go home and take a course of it. Doesn't require hospitalization. Remdesivir, as you will have seen in the paperwork, is for infusion. That means you will have a saline bag full of stuff and in the old arm, which you aren't going home with. That's happening in a hospital. So presumably you've already been admitted to hospital at this point, which would suggest to me that you are already more ill than somebody who can be handed a tablet and told to go home and take it. Potentially.
And they controlled for what you'd expect, comorbidities, treatment and treatments that may affect COVID-19 survival. So they looked at age, gender, race, ethnicity, nicotine use, diabetes, which we know is a big factor, obesity, chronic lower respiratory disease, ischemic heart disease, whether they took tocilizumab or not. That's the monoclonal antibody that was quite popular for a while. Glucocorticoids, which of course are the steroid drugs, and whether the patient was ventilated or not.
Okay, excellent. We've got no data on that. We've just got that they controlled for it in some way, and we can't see how it was controlled for. I notice that there is no control, like a placebo wing. There's no control wing in this study where people had neither of those drugs. So weren't treated with remdesivir, weren't treated with ivermectin. And I also noticed that there's no control for whether or not somebody had been inoculated, whether they had had the vaccine, and vaccine 1, vaccine 2 and booster. That data is not in there and isn't controlled for. So how is it a well thought out study? How is it accurate? How can we be sure that this data is as groundbreaking as Dr. Campbell thinks it is?
And the primary outcome they wanted to assess here was fairly simple: did the patients die or not? So that's the main outcome of the study. Did more patients survive? So primary outcome, mortality. Significance, of course, was taken at p equals 0.05, which is standard for all scientific medical papers. Now, results: 41,000 patients who had COVID-19. So 41,608 patients had COVID-19. Treated with ivermectin, the group there was 1,072. Treated with the much more expensive remdesivir, 40,536. So again, we've got two groups now. Clearly, there's a lot more in the remdesivir group than in the ivermectin group. But a group of 1,000 is really quite a good group. Well, not good. You want a bigger group as you can get. But it's a good-sized group on which to do statistics. You get very, very valid statistics from a group of that size, of 1,000. Ivermectin was associated with the reduced mortality versus remdesivir of the odds ratio of 0.381. In other words, you're about 70% less likely to die if you take ivermectin compared to taking remdesivir.
Oh dear. Right. Okay. So you have one group which is 40 times larger than the other. You have one group, and actually, if you dig into a little of the data, the data set where people had remdesivir was slightly more. The average age was 10 years older than the group that took ivermectin. They could have controlled for that. They could have played with the figures for that. But there are some issues with doing that. The next thing is, again, you've mentioned this much more expensive remdesivir. Price has nothing to do with efficacy. You've got to look at efficacy, and you've got to look at the data for that. 70%, those figures are just ridiculous. I don't think so. Odds ratios aren't easily converted. He's done the 1 minus OR times 100. But odds ratios aren't quite as simple to convert like that to get an accurate figure and express it as a percentage. There are a lot of YouTube channels out there. You can go and have a look at the maths for that. It boils your head somewhat, but it's out there and explained. Had there been a 70% better outcome with ivermectin than remdesivir, We wouldn't need to be looking at this study. That would have been noticed by clinicians very, very quickly, and it would have been being used. This isn't good science, to be quite honest. And again, you are referencing this as if it is a peer-reviewed study that's been blinded, controlled, etc. It's not. It's a retrospective study that has been put together for a conference paper, and this is the abstract from it. The actual abstract, I've read the abstract. It is literally half a page. It's a column on a PDF document. There's nothing here that you can actually point at. It could be interesting. I'm not saying that ivermectin absolutely doesn't work. What I'm saying is you have no evidence to show that it does. That evidence does not exist, and it's certainly not in this paper.
And the p-value there is 1 in. Is that 1 in? That's 1 in. So that would be 1 in 10. That would be 1 in 100. That would be 1 in 1,000. So that's 1 in 10,000. So the results of that arising by chance are 1 in 10,000. Very unlikely to arise by chance. So ivermectin was associated with reduced mortality versus remdesivir at 0.308. So there you go, about 70% less likely to die if you had ivermectin compared to remdesivir in this study. It's pretty convincing data from national databases. Conclusion, directly from the authors, ivermectin was associated with decreased mortality in patients with COVID-19 compared to remdesivir. Yep, that data shows that unequivocally. Ivermectin was associated with decreased mortality in patients with COVID-19 when compared to remdesivir. In future, more publications are published with the similar result to the current analysis. The certainty of evidence will increase. Now, of course, these authors do cover themselves with saying we always need bigger, better trials, but of course, who's going to pay for those? Because there's no money in this, so no one's going to pay for it.
Okay, what you have shown is an association, and that is not a confirmation that ivermectin reduces mortality. It is an association only from a retrospective study where we don't have enough data about how the mode in which that was undertaken. On two drugs that are probably used in very different ways. Again, ivermectin available to be handed out in a blister pack and told take 1 of those a day, 2 of those a day, whatever the number is, as opposed to remdesivir, which is an infusion. You're getting that into your arm, so you're sat in a hospital bed. The chances are that if you're already in a hospital bed and they're giving you remdesivir, you are already substantially more ill than were you to be handed a blister pack and told go home, drink some fluids and take 1 of those a day. We've got no idea what levels the ivermectin was taken in because the CDC, the FDA do not have or have not approved ivermectin as a way to as a drug that is suitable for treating COVID-19, which means that there is no amount on it, there's no recommended dosage on it. So people may have been taking very different doses depending on what their doctor suggested they take. The control in this is, from what I can see, quite weak. Why Dr. Campbell is quite so excited about this and is, quite frankly, I'm disappointed, because this chap is a healthcare educator. He has a huge YouTube following. That to me says you have a huge responsibility for what you put out there. I've heard the phrase used, stay in your lane, and I can't agree with it. If I were to stay in my lane, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a clinician, I'm not a scientist, but what I can do is look at data, how it's presented, and work out what things mean. I'm not an incredibly clever person. I've got an inquiring mind. I want to know how things work. To do a video like this probably takes me about 3 days of study to find out what all this stuff means. It should take Dr. Campbell much less. He is, he's a PhD, he's a doctor, he should know this stuff. Now, in that case, why should you listen to me and not him? Well, you shouldn't. You shouldn't listen to either of us. You should treat all of that information skeptically. However, let's have a quick look at this. So I'm going to put a link to this site in the notes. This is Dr. Greg Tucker Kellogg's site. Okay, so within this site you might notice this chap, Yakov Effimenko. Have I heard that name before? Professor Greg Tucker Kellogg and Yakov Effimenko. Oh, he wasn't the first author of the study that you're referring to, was he, Dr. Campbell? Oh yes, he was. I'm going to point you to this. I'm not going to put clips on of it. This is very worth watching. It's about 18-20 minutes, and none of it is overly technical. Some of Professor Tucker Kellogg's work on is incredibly technical. This isn't. This is clear enough for any layman to understand, and understand what's being said, and understand why I think, and this chap thinks, that the information is being misrepresented. Now, why is it being misrepresented? That's another thing. I don't understand. There is a clear confirmation bias. Dr. Campbell has a real thing for ivermectin. He believes that this is scandalous. I believe what is scandalous is his misrepresentation of what this drug can do. Because in presenting it, he makes himself attractive to the anti-vax community who love this drug. And look, it would appear we are coming to the end of this COVID-19 issue. It will still kill people. It still is, even the less severe Omicron variant. However, it does seem that we are going to get more natural immunity with less deaths from it, which has got to be a good thing. However, there will be in the future another pandemic. And if this information, this disinformation, misinformation, is spread in the same way, the outcome for humans is not good. Professor Brian Cox, when asked back in about 2014, I think, what will the human race die of? And they were considering things like, blowing ourselves up and asteroids and etc. And his response was stupidity. The human race will die of stupidity. And I don't think he's wrong. Look, thanks for watching. Please go over to Professor Greg Tucker Kellogg's site and have a look. Full disclosure, I reached out to him after a previous video because I watched one of his which said something very similar to mine, and kind of thanked him for affirming what I'd said, and he was good enough to have a look at my video and make a comment to me on it, which I'm quite humbled with. There are other sites out there, and I'll see if I can link some others in. But yeah, Dr. Campbell, have a look at it. Step back and look at your confirmation bias. It is definitely there. And I'd ask you to correct what you've said. Don't just pull down the video. Correct what you've said. Point it out. Be the bigger man. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.